Hello there, and welcome back to The Price of Pain. Normally, this is the part where I would tell you about our upcoming guest and the wonderful conversation that we had. We are planning on speaking with Dr. Chris McCurdy for the second time and build upon his last visit where he spoke about a number of different pharmacological and other interventions from a chemist and a pharmacist standpoint. We were going to hone in on kratom specifically as a treatment this time around. But unfortunately, there were some scheduling barriers that we couldn't quite overcome. And so by the time we sit down with him by this Friday, in a few days from now, it will be too short of a time between then and our release date, and we won't be able to get this out to you on time. So instead, I'd like to reflect a little bit on this past season and what we've accomplished up to this point and some of our purpose. And rest assured, we will release Dr. McCurdy's episode and another fantastic interview that I'm expecting later this week as well with Dr. Joe Riley. That's going to be a real fun one. We've been trying to get him on for a while now, and I think finally we've got the time to sit down. Those will be released in January. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But in the meantime, there are a number of people that I would like to thank on this journey over the course of our inaugural season. We started back at the beginning of the fall semester, and we're able to put out a product, I think, that fulfills our goal of education and outreach and awareness of pain research, pain management, pain treatment. And we do that by getting a number of clinicians and researchers on here who are really experts in their particular area. And in some way, hopefully, we've been able to convey how they use pain treatment and pain research in their jobs. But in order to do that, in order to get guests across the table from me in these conversations, a number of people have contributed as well that you don't ever see or really hear about. Eric Weber, our lab manager at Price here, the Pain Research and Intervention Center of Excellence at UF, is the driving force in getting all of this equipment together, and his technical expertise in setting up our studio really was the foundation for everything that we'd done up until now. And he also couldn't have done that without the help of Maria Aguirre, who was in a position to coordinate all of the people that are necessary, not only for within the podcast, but within UF, to make sure that we checked off all the necessary boxes and got approval from the necessary areas. She was able to not only coordinate the funding, but make sure that everybody got what they needed in order to get this equipment and get our licensing for our wonderful soundtrack. And on that note, I have to thank Kathleen and Ray Lynch for the use of Ray's Celestial Soda Pop. You hear that at the beginning and end of every episode. I've loved that since I was in high school. That was a long time ago. I can remember the day that I first heard it, and I think it was on a Walkman. It was on a cassette player in orchestra class. And when we started talking about this podcast and the vision that we had for it, that song was first to pop into my head. I didn't realize until later that it was already used by NPR for a time throughout the 80s and 90s, so some of you may recognize it from there as well. And then also, I want to thank Roger Fillingham and Joe Riley, who are not only pioneers in this research here and founders of Price and the Price that we have today, but also provided their unwavering support for this podcast and getting us up and rolling and making the equipment available and giving me time within my schedule to help realize the vision that we had for this show. And last, and maybe most importantly, Kat Antunes, who you never get to see on the podcast, but she's here in the studio for every single episode. She's sitting right over there right now. And now I think, because I've brought her up twice today on camera in an earlier take in this one, I think we finally trained her so where she doesn't perk up and turn around when I say her name. But it's always funny and somewhat distracting whenever I do mention her on the rare occasion. Far too rare, I should say, for how important she is. It's funny because she always perks up and turns around like she's going to answer me, but she doesn't have a mic or anything. What she does do, however, is function as an engineer for every single one of these episodes. Make sure our visual and our sound levels are where they need to be, and then takes all of this footage afterwards into production to give you the episode that you see. She's the one that came up with the graphics for our new introduction. You may have noticed that that's changed over time. It was her idea to put my face, which I think is perfect for radio and maybe not so much for, this TV kind of stuff and podcast, in front of the camera to get a better connection with you as the listener. You may have noticed that I just jumped and I'm not in the position I was before. That's because my teleprompter copped out and we had to cut there and splice it. I'm about to do it again, but I'll pick right up where I left off. Ready? And has really done a number of things to improve our outreach. We went from just my friends and family and colleagues listening to viewers and listeners on 4 continents and growing. And that's due in large part to Kat's efforts in trying to get us in front of as many people as possible. And on that note, there is something I try to avoid doing if I can, because it sometimes comes off as tacky or as salesmanship, and it's really not. But whenever you do listen to these on your podcatcher, or if you watch them on YouTube, that you can like each individual episode. You can subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, both on YouTube or on however you listen to your podcasts. And I don't say that because we get anything monetarily from it or anything like that. I hate that it sounds like a sales pitch, but what it does is it goes into the big machine of the internet and social media and whatever you want to call it, and into the algorithm that basically puts us in front of people who may have not heard of us before directly, but are interested in what we're talking about. And it helps us to expand our vision and bring this science in pain research and management to more people who may benefit from it. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It doesn't even hurt to go back to previous episodes and do the same. And then there's one last thing that really helps and that would help me make a better podcast for you. And that's to comment on YouTube, on our Instagram handle, and you'll see that in the caption on the bottom of the screen now. You can email to us. You can even in the descriptor of the podcast episode, we'll put the email address again. But reach out, comments, things that you like, things that you don't like. Try to be nice, because we're people too, and we put a lot of hard work into this. But I want to give you the podcast that you like most. And while I can't make everybody happy, I can certainly try. And we've got a lot of ideas planned for the coming season and some things that we want to change to increase interaction with you, more questions and answers, and perhaps different formats. But we welcome all input in developing and cultivating a podcast that's unique and effective in conveying those 3 goals of education and outreach and awareness that I had mentioned earlier. I want to bring up, just in closing, a story, and this is a thank you. And I'm gonna, in the same way that I act as a proxy for you, the audience, the listener, when I conduct these interviews, somebody very close to me has done the same on your behalf, I think. And I have a cousin who I'm very close with, and we grew up as siblings. And her husband, Terry, I think of as more of a brother-in-law than my cousin's husband. But we were just talking a couple days ago, and I was overwhelmed with how much he enjoys the podcast, and I didn't really realize. I take for granted who listens and who doesn't sometimes, but just in some of the feedback he had given, and the fact that he enjoys listening, and he makes a routine out of it. I have to think that he's not alone in that, and not only is it touching, but it's motivating to try to continue to bring the best podcast that we can for you and continue to improve with the price of pain. We will, on that note, be back on January 12th. I've got a number of guests already lined up, and as I mentioned, we'll go into this break here over the holidays with 2 episodes in the tank ready to release when we hit the ground in January. But in the meantime, this is the entire Price of Pain staff and support wishing you a wonderful holiday. I hope you make the best of your time with your friends and loved ones, and have a happy new year. And until then, I guess we'll see you on January 12th.